All right. Before we actually start looking at multilingual, let me just ask a couple questions. How many people have a site in more than one language right now? How many people need to have a site in more than one language right now? Okay. So what we're going to be looking at today is actually Joomla Core Multilingual. Starting in 1.6, we had made some amazing progress in how Joomla handles multilingual capabilities. And we have some really great stuff and some hidden gems in there that I think can make life so much easier for people that need to have or want to have a site in more than one language or more than one region of the world or anything like that. So we're going to take a look at some of that. But first I want to back up for just a minute. There we go. I want to back up for just a minute and look at why is multilingual important. I know there's a lot of international visitors here, but at least in the United States, I gave this presentation before in a local Joomla Day, a version of this, and it was like, it was really important because in the United States, multilingual, you assume everybody speaks English, and that's the end of the story, right? But it's not. There are almost 2.3 billion internet users around the world. Only 7% of those actually speak English. On the other hand, about 50% or 45%, almost half of the sites in the world are only English sites. So there's this enormous imbalance and that is created by English. And that's not to say that these people that don't speak English as their primary language may not speak English, but it's definitely not a comfortable experience. And for your business, the easier you can make your experience on your site for your users is definitely more important. In researching about this, especially because we're in the United States, I found some kind of interesting quotes. Americans are people who prefer the continent to their own country, but refuse to learn its languages. And I don't know how many of you been to the J and Beyond conference. At least for me, that was like so true. And I remember that when I saw this quote, we go over there and was like, oh, this is cool, but I have no clue how to speak German. But there are other things outside of English. But even within English, even if you do learn to speak correct English, who are you going to speak it to? There's multiple different dialects per se of English. There's the never-ending debate of is Joomla ENGB or ENUS? There's different styles of even English itself. And so sites that only focus on one language, even if that language is English, alienate large portions of their potential audience, large portions of their clients or their customers. So, bottom line, language creates barriers. It's an actual barrier that prevents me from communicating to you and you from communicating to me. And I can't understand anything you're saying, and that's a barrier for us. And our job as web developers or designers or site implementers, administrators, is to start breaking down those barriers and making it easier for everybody to be able to access my site so that they can understand it. There's a couple ways we can do that. We can translate our content, offer them, translated content in their language. We can make our site available not only by translating the content, but make it easy for them to access the content and make it a seamless transition and very smooth for them. And we can also provide them an easy interface to, again, choose their language. If it's not a language they're comfortable with, they might know English, they might be able to pick it out and understand to some extent, but if they're not familiar with it, they're probably going to go find somebody else that has an interface and language that's more familiar to them and that they're more comfortable with. So our goal is to break down these barriers with Joomla and our multilingual implementations. So, what does multilingual look like? What are we talking about when we say we're building a multilingual Joomla site? What does that even mean? Well, it might be easier to first get some misconceptions out of the way of what it's not actually. My word, it's a mess. It's not multiple sites with the same data, okay? We're not talking about having an English site and a separate Joomla installation that's a French site and a separate Joomla installation that's a German site. From a maintenance perspective, from a site implementer or a maintainer's perspective, that's a nightmare. Having to keep all my extensions and all my Joomla installations up to date across all my sites. That just made my job 3 or 4 times harder right there. So we're not talking about that. That's not really an option for a sustainable strategy for multilingual. We're not talking about multiple languages on the same page. You might laugh and think, what? I haven't seen that before. I have. Like your owner's manual that you get, with some little gadget, and it has a paragraph for one language, and then English, and then Chinese, and then French, and then Spanish, all on the same page. And I've seen entire websites that do that. They have English content, and then right below that they have Chinese content and French content, or whatever languages they're targeting. We're definitely not talking about that. That's even worse. We're not talking about a fragmented user experience. We can answer some of these problems, and we can kind of worm our way around and figure out some of those problems, but it's not a very smooth, seamless user experience. So we want to make it as smooth as possible. We want our users to feel comfortable in their language. Not only they understand the words on the page, but they're comfortable navigating around our site in their own language. So, my word, that's a mess. What we're talking about, one site, one Joomla installation, one database, one set of Joomla files with translated content for all the languages that we want to present. We're talking about a seamless transition between languages. Someone comes to our site via an English link, they can easily get to the same content in French or Chinese or whatever. We're also talking about a completely immersed language experience, okay? And we'll get into some of this with how Joomla deals with language translations and language management, but it's important that every aspect of your site be in the language, your target language. You can't just translate an article and expect them to understand all the menus and modules and language strings and everything else. They're only going to understand what that little section on the page is, and you're still missing a lot. So we want to create a completely immersed language experience in each of our target languages. All right? So how did we do it? How do we actually build Joomla multilingual sites? Well, this is a relatively new thing. In Joomla 1.5, what you could do is, well, you started with, we really didn't do it in 1.5. So this is relatively new for the Joomla community, and it's seen really great growth, and there's a lot of really great new features there. Starting in 1.6, really refined in 2.5, and some really nice administrative options added in Joomla 3.0. And we're going to look at some of those today and how we can make your life easy at the same time as adding new features to your site in other languages. All right? So, Joomla 3.0 multilingual. Now, I say 3.0 because we're on Joomla 3, and most new sites that are being built are on Joomla 3. But it's the same principles that apply to Joomla 2.5. Most everything is the same. There are some really cool new things in Joomla 3. But most of what we're talking about today can be applied to your Joomla 2.5 site as well. The interface will be different, though, but you'll find that out. All right? So how do we do this? There are really only 3 principles that you need to understand for a multilingual site. And they're very basic. If you understand those principles, how each one interacts with the other ones and how they work together, it's going to be so much easier for you to understand the details. So many times when I'm teaching about this, people think it's hard and difficult. But if you get these 3 concepts, it'll be so much easier for the rest to fall into place. The first concept is Joomla languages themselves. How do we translate the software? This comes back to our totally immersed user experience. The software has to be translated. The software itself has to be translated if we want to provide a very smooth user experience. We can't just rely on our content. What do they do when they come to a login module? They don't know what create an account means. We have to translate everything, and that includes our Joomla languages. So we're going to look at that, how we do with Joomla languages. Also, creating our site navigation. This is within a language and across languages. So we create a completely immersed language navigation for each language, but we also need to provide them a facility to get between languages. If they come from a news story, and it's in, for example, if there's a news story about something happening in Europe and it's a French site, I would rather read that in English Now, how do I get there? That's what we're talking about with creating our site navigation in Joomla. And last of all, translating your content. Actually putting the content together, the stuff that you want your visitors to read. And this is actually the last step. These first two steps are just as important as translating the content itself. Well, they're all three very important. So we're going to look at these three concepts quickly today. And hopefully they'll help in being able to craft multilingual sites in 2, 3, 4, 13, 70 languages, whatever you want. All right? First, where's it? Our Joomla Languages. Joomla has a language manager now. If you go under the extensions tab, you'll find a language option where all our system languages are managed. This isn't the content itself, the articles per se. This is the languages. And we can install, my word, crazy here. We can install all our different languages here. One of the new things that you're not going to find in 2.5 in most versions there is a new option right up here, our install language option, where it goes and grabs all the recognized or complete official language packs from the Joomla extensions directory and lets you just install them right there. So you install your site, I want to add another language, and there you go. We've got that there. Installing languages is important. And this isn't the content, remember, this is all of the Joomla system output. So all the little language strings that you find here and there in a login module or your breadcrumbs module or everywhere else is found in these packs. And installing these packs allows you to utilize those languages. There's some important other features here. These are installed languages. There's also content languages that we use in order to create content and the navigation between languages. And there's some other cool new features over here, language overrides. One of the important things that we noticed in building sites for large organizations that have lots of languages or want to be centralized or localized for lots of different regions is I may get a Spanish translation pack or something, but my local dialect or my local accent per se doesn't necessarily conform to the standard Spanish language. Language overrides allows me to very easily find those strings that don't really conform and change them to what I need them to be. So gone are the days of trying to find the right INI file and opening it up and trying to find the right language string and editing it and hoping you did it right, because if you didn't, you're going to break your whole site. And if you break your whole site, you're going to have to restore it, and that might not even fix it, and then you have to start all over. No more of that. We have language overrides now. It makes life a lot easier. No, this isn't 2.5. Yeah. So these are Joomla languages. This is the first step. And it just got a lot easier, because before I would have to say, well, you go to the Joomla extensions directory and you search for your language and hopefully they have something and you can download it and you upload it and install it. No more. Install languages right there, find your language and install it in just a couple clicks. So creating those allows us to translate the site itself. All right, now there's a difference. We talked about the install languages and the content languages. That was the picture in the upper right corner here. There's a difference between those, and it's very important to understand what they are and what they do. Installed languages is all our system output. The language strings, the Joomla output, system messages, error messages that show up, system emails for registering your account or resetting your password like that. All of that is the installed languages, and that's those language packs that we downloaded and installed in the site. Okay. You also need content languages, and this is you create your own content languages. You say new, and I want to add a new language to my site. Content languages are the front end or the user languages. It's used for language detection. When somebody comes to the site and their browser says they're a French user, and so I can automatically send them to the French version of my site. It's also used for language navigation, going between languages. The content languages define what languages your site is available as far as content-wise, and lets the system know what languages are available for your users to navigate around in. So an important distinction for the languages itself. But once you've got the languages installed, which is a relatively simple process, questions at the end, sorry. we're going to move on to the next step. And again, these are these relatively simple concepts. And if you understand just kind of what they are and how they interact, it's going to make things a lot easier. Creating site navigation. The site navigation is very important. And we're going to talk about creating content next. But one thing that most people don't want to do is create site navigation correctly. And you can do things, your personal preference may play into this, but it's very important to, for example, create unique menus for each language. It's important to do that because we get to set per language home pages, and you can't have multiple home pages in one. You can't try to separate the menu modules if you have all your home pages in one menu. It also lets you to have unique navigation. So I move to my other, an alternative language, and I have a different menu module up there with a different menu in it that has all the correct translations and links to the correct articles, different articles and stuff like that. It's very important to create your site navigation per language. So if I have a main menu in English, and I want to do a French site, I need to have another main menu in French, okay? It's important to do that. Some people try to skip and don't do that, and they do that with creating content too, with not wanting to categorize content similarly. It's very important to create your site structure in a way that you can grow without having to come back and redo it because you didn't want to do it correctly the first time. We also have translating the content itself. Now this is very simple. When you're in your content, you have a very simple drop down to set a language. Same with your menu items, but it's again, I want to stress here, very important. Organization is key. Even if you only have 40 or 50 articles in your entire site, you add 2 more languages on there. Now you have 150 articles. So creating your organization, creating your category trees per language. So each language has its own category structure, and assigning your articles appropriately is very important. We have so many people. I did a webinar on this when 1.6 first came out, and we had so many people contact me the next few weeks on Twitter that say, I don't know how to do this. I have a blog, for example. I have a blog page here, and I threw all my articles in there, and I don't know how to do it over there. Well, that's because they didn't want to create their additional categories, and so they threw 3 languages of articles into one blog category, and now they can't separate them out. Now they can't have a French blog page that's separate from an English blog page. And as an English user, I really don't want to read the French blog posts. They're the same thing. I just can't understand them. And as a French user, I'm sure the same thing. They don't really care to read the same article in English. So it's very important for you to create your category structures and your menu structures per language. And that's very important with translating content. If you don't do that, I guarantee you will have a mess down the road. Pretty much guaranteed. And you're going to regret it and come back and eventually do it right, hopefully. Or just quit, I guess. That's an option. But honestly, that's Joomla Multilingual in a nutshell. Okay, we have 3 concepts. We have our menus, we have our languages, and we have our content. Those 3 together create our site. All right. And I was going to do a demo here, but the network I have to be connected to does not have internet. With those 3 concepts, we have a Joomla Multilingual site. Now, I wouldn't necessarily stop there. With larger sites, this can get a little bit complicated or messy, even if you have very good organizational structures. For example, we're completing a site right now that's going to be launched probably the next 2 months for the United Nations. That's a complete online encyclopedia for the International Labor Organization. No matter how well I make my category structure, no matter how well I make my menu structure, 85,000 articles in each language is hard to manage across 6 languages. So, how do we do that? If anyone was in lightning talks this morning, you remember our famous tool, Josetta. And honestly, I did not know they were going to do a presentation on this. I don't work for Josetta or anything digital. I have nothing to do with them. We just use them because it saves me a lot of headaches and it saves me a lot of time. It does everything. It translates my content, translates my modules, translates my menus, and especially for organizations that you have a lot of content on, it lets me invite other people to do the translations, as opposed to me having to do them all or having to get Word documents from people and put them all in because I don't want them in the admin interface, or they don't want to be in the admin interface because they don't want to have to learn it. It lets me invite other people to help me translate this stuff and help maintain it. I actually deleted slides here from Josetta because you went over all of them this morning, all the features of Josetta, but it's very good for our. Just as an example, for our encyclopedia, we're using that for even K2. It works with K2 content and categories, everything that's actual content. So that's pretty much everything in Joomla besides plugins. It translates. That includes, all your menus and your menu items, your modules, your categories for articles, the articles themselves. Everything can be translated with Josetta, and we've had great experience with it, even with people that aren't Joomla users. We have a lot of for our larger sites. There's people that they don't even know what Joomla is. They don't even know they're on Joomla. They just know they're translating articles, and it's an easy interface for them. So if anybody's looking at building a site that's of any scale at all, and even if it's a small site, again, we talked about even if you only have 50 articles in your entire site, over 3 languages, that's 150 articles, and that gets a little bit hard to manage. And Josetta makes that easier. But even if you only have 50 articles now and you think, oh, I still don't want it, I'm assuming that you're wanting your site to grow. And so it will be much easier for you to, first of all, set up your structure correctly with your categories and your menu items in the first place, and maybe worth a look at something like Josetta, although I think Josetta is the only tool of its kind right now, to help you manage that as your site grows, as your business grows, as your organization grows, and let your site grow with it easily with a little bit less growing pains across languages. All right? Let me think. Where was that at? This is a little bit shorter because I actually do not have, I think we have 13 minutes left that I was hoping to use up with a little bit of demo, but the network won't let me do that. We are going to, I have not actually scheduled it yet because we have another conflicting webinar. We are planning on doing just a free community webinar where we're going to take these concepts and actually build a mini multilingual site live on a webinar with people so that we can show these in action. It's easy to look at a screenshot or hear somebody say, oh, it's so easy, and then you go home and it's like, what? It's not working for me like he said. He said it was going to be easy. It is simple, but it can appear complex if you haven't done it before. Once you understand how they work together, I think it's so much easier to do. So keep an eye out on Joomla's Twitter or something like that. In probably the next couple of weeks, we'll be scheduling a webinar open for the Joomla community to look at how we do Joomla Multilingual in 3.0, all the new features there, and how it can expand your site and expand your site's audience. With that said, I think we have 14 minutes left. Any questions? Yes. Start up here. You were up earlier.
There was a slide where you talked about 2 different types of language.
Okay. So